Hello my friends, and right away I want to start with the situation in the USA concerning Ukraine today. So we all hear every day that the Russians constantly threaten possible nuclear strikes. And in the USA they stated that as far back as 2022 they anticipated that Russia might launch a nuclear strike against Ukraine. However, they didn't plan to use nuclear weapons in response.
Mr. Putin was speaking about Russian medium-range weapons that could strike anywhere in Europe, or his intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. But the scare in 2022 involved so-called battlefield nukes, tactical weapons small enough to be loaded into an artillery shell and designed to eviscerate a military unit or a few city blocks. At least initially, their use would look nothing like an all-out nuclear exchange, the great fear of the Cold War. The effects would be horrific but limited to a relatively small geographic area, perhaps detonated over the Black Sea, or blasted into a Ukrainian military base. Yet the White House concern ran so deep that task forces met to map out a response. Administration officials said that the United States countermove would have to be non-nuclear. But they quickly added that there would have to be some kind of dramatic reaction, perhaps even a conventional attack on the units that had launched the nuclear weapons, or they would risk emboldening not only Mr. Putin but every other authoritarian with a nuclear arsenal, large or small.
Approximately as it was done in Yemen, and that's where it will all end. So unfortunately, that's the reality. So what do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's immediately turn to the front line, as there are issues here. And let's start right away with the Bakhmut direction. I think everyone remembers the statement from the Ukrainian Armed Forces last week about the occupiers breaking through practically to Chasiv Yar. So they didn't make it 2 kilometers. The Ukrainian Armed Forces conducted counterattacks and crushed the Russian formations. Unfortunately, this situation is repeating today. The General Staff even officially reported that the Ukrainian Armed Forces repelled another attack by the Russians from the eastern side of Chasiv Yar. Thus, it turns out that the occupiers are breaking through from extreme front line approximately 2.5 kilometers toward the city, bypassing Ivanivka and Bogdanivka. So they fail to consolidate, but the situation is extremely complex if they already have the opportunity to break through to the city. So battles also continue in Klashivka and Avdiivka areas, but the Russians have no new successes here, and the front line remains unchanged over the day. Shelling also continues along the entire front line, further complicating defense maintenance. In the Avdiivka direction, the occupiers conducted 14 attacks along the entire front line. Intense battles continue for Berdachi, Orlivka and Tonenke, so the General Staff, as before, doesn't confirm that the Russians have made progress, so the front line remains unchanged here. However, in reality, the occupiers are already in the populated areas and fierce battles are underway. There is confirmation of this through geolocation data. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are destroying Russian equipment right in the center of these settlements. However, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are doing everything possible to resist the occupiers, so there is hope that they will be able to defeat them and regain control of these positions. Additionally, the occupiers don't cease their offensive actions on Pervomaiske and have resumed attacks on Nevelsk. They spent one day regrouping and then resumed their attacks. As of today, the front line remains unchanged. In the Marinka direction, the occupiers conducted 18 attacks. So the situation is very challenging as battles are taking place in Krasnohorivka, near Georgiivka, and in Vuhledar. The occupiers in this direction have also started shelling with guided bombs from aviation. So the situation here is extremely difficult. However, even under such conditions, the Ukrainian Armed Forces continue to hold the defense, and the occupiers haven't been able to advance over the day. In the Vuhledar direction, shelling continues, and offensive actions have resumed. This time, they are attempting to break through to Novodarivka. Several attacks have been recorded so far with moderate activity, and the Ukrainian Armed Forces are successfully holding their defense. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the occupiers continue to storm the area near Verbove. They are attempting to advance through the fields to encircle Robotyne. Despite reports from the Ukrainian Armed Forces that the Russians are already breaking through in Robotyne, they cannot fully take control of the settlement, so attempts to move through the fields persist. So there have been no changes along the front line over the day, and shelling continues at an intensifying rate. Additionally, it's worth noting that active construction of defensive lines is ongoing along the entire front line, not just in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Furthermore, today we see reports that Russia is engaged in serial production of FAB 1500 aviation bombs. So foreign analysts already predict that they are doing this to change the balance on the front line.
This type of ammunition is very dangerous. During impact, the bomb can leave behind a crater up to 15 meters in diameter, and the radius of damage by shrapnel and the shock wave is about 500 m. Military-industrial enterprises of the Russian Federation have begun mass production of the heaviest FAB 1500 M54 glide bombs with controlled planning and correction modules, or UMPK. According to the tabloid Bild, 50 Ukrainian soldiers die every day from these munitions during the hostilities in Ukraine. The publication says that back in November 2023, the commander of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Mykola Olszczuk, expressed concern about signs of preparations for intensive use of 1.5-ton FAB 1500 by the enemy. However, Russian channels reported that these aerial bombs have been produced since the beginning of the war. Journalists noted that in February, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited a plant where these munitions are produced.
As evident, unfortunately, the Russians are one step ahead. As you recall, they began actively using drones, forcing Ukraine to ramp up production efforts to catch up with the Russians and level the playing field on the battlefield. Recognizing this, the Russians decided to take action with aviation and guided bombs. They understand that at this level, the Ukrainian Armed Forces cannot effectively counter them since we lack such a significant number of guided bombs and practically have no aviation. So their aim is to tilt the situation in their favor. They also realize that if both sides are equally dug in and have similar weaponry, the front line will stalemate, resulting in only casualties. However, with the use of powerful guided bombs, it will be easier for them to destroy defenses and conduct subsequent attacks. So overall, the situation is challenging. In the Kherson direction, the entire right bank is heavily shelled from both artillery, which has come closer again, and from aviation. The Russians are no longer afraid to fly, so it seems that their planes haven't been shot down in this area for a long time. So shelling of the village of Kreminna continues. The General Staff reports that assaults on the foothold have resumed, although Russian correspondents provide conflicting information stating that they haven't been storming the village for a week. And the most unpleasant news is that they have begun constructing 3 defense lines around the village of Kreminna.
We inform everyone. Around the enemy's bridgehead in the village of Kreminna, our troops are building 3 lines of defense. Under pressure from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, the commander of the Dnipro Military Command finally decided to stop the enemy's bridgehead. By the way, we have written about this more than once: stop the enemy's bridgehead and stop mindlessly storming it. General Teplinsky listened to the voice of reason.
Now, let's turn back to the Luhansk direction. In the area of Siversk, the occupiers continue their attacks near Spirne and have resumed offensive actions in Rozdolivka. They are attempting to approach the outskirts of the village, intensifying their shelling, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces are holding their defense and attempting to repel all attacks. In the direction of Kreminna, fighting continues in the area near the village of Terne, and battles have resumed near Yampolivka. So there have been no successes for the Russians so far, despite the ongoing fighting in this area for over the month. Meanwhile, in the Svatove area, the occupiers shelled Novoyegorivka and the area near Berestove, but no offensive actions have been recorded as before. In the direction of Kupiansk, shelling continues, but all attacks in the area of Sinkivka and Kislivka have ceased. The front line remains unchanged, with no successes for the occupiers as before. And that's all from me. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.